18th meeting of the Historic Landmarks Commission. First item of business is public comment. Any member of the public may address the Historic Landmarks Commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject that's within our jurisdiction that is not scheduled on this agenda. Seeing no public, I will close public comment and move on to approval of the minutes of January 4th, 2012. Have a motion? Motion by Drury.
Second.
Second by Sharp. Any additions, corrections, or clarifications? Anyone? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed?
I'm abstaining from item 3 only.
Murray is abstaining from item 3. Arias is abstaining from total. Motion carries. Next is the consent calendar. I am abstaining from item A. Mr. Lamone.
Mr. Chair, today's consent calendar consisted of item A, 330 State Street, was approved as submitted. Item B, 727 State Street, was approved as submitted. Item C, 702 Laguna Street, final review of details, was final approval as submitted with some revised color and materials lighting boards. Item D, 128 East Canyon Perdido, was also approved as submitted. Those items were reviewed by Craig Schallenberger. And item E, 202 State Street, was continued 2 weeks and was reviewed by Don Sharp.
Okay. I have a motion for ratification of the consent calendar.
So moved.
Motion by Sharp, second by Drury. All in favor?
Aye.
And again, Student abstains from item A. Motion carries. Staff, any announcements, requests by applicants for continuances?
No.
No. Okay, moving right along. Subcommittee reports.
Oh. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had the designations subcommittee this morning, and we looked at one application to for the Lockheed. I guess will be just a plaque for the site, and then also looking at the designating the trees at the eucalyptus at the library site. So those are in the works, and we have also looked at other lists of things to be designated for this year.
And again, that Lockheed plaque was going to be located at 101 State Street for the benefit of the public. I wanted to go back to announcements, actually. Would like everybody to keep positive thoughts in their minds for Susan Gantz and her father. Susan is in Iowa. As you know, she's not here, but her father's rather ill. Probably won't be with us for very long, so please keep her and her family and her father in your thoughts. Moving on, next item is the concept review of 1920 Laguna Street. This is a proposal to demolish 93 square feet of existing floor area and construct 111 square feet of new floor area on an existing 4,939 square foot, two-story single-family residence. The net increase, which will be on the ground floor, is 18 square feet. This is a designated structure of merit, the Oliver Mistretta residence. Project requires environmental assessment and historic resource findings. Introduce yourself, please, for the record, and give us a brief presentation.
I'm Kent Mixon,
Welcome.
Architect for the proposed project, and my client, Joanne Northrup, is in the audience.
Welcome.
As you know, you guys all there's pictures as well that were submitted, which might be...
Staff will pass those out in a minute.
I'll just kind of run through
Thank
those.
you.
If I could.
Yeah, and if you can
I
keep
know
them
you-
on the screen for us there.
I know you guys are well versed and very familiar with this house. It's the arts and crafts kind of green and green style bungalow at 1920 Laguna Street. was built probably sometime around the turn of the century, though we don't know who the original architect was or when it was exactly built. There was a significant addition that was done by Windsor Sewell in 37, and then the latest addition, pretty extensive remodel, was in 84, 85 from the client that actually had it designated as a structure of merit. These are all out of order, but anyway, these are just various pictures of the project from around the neighborhood.
And who's that?
That would be me.
Okay.
Just down from Roosevelt School, yeah, in between Pedregosa and what's the street there? Yeah, Montgomery Street. This is from the alleyway. The addition that we're proposing is on the rear of the house, and these are just kind of showing some pictures. This is looking towards the area of development from the alleyway right now. This is actually the neighbor's property, looking through that by the garage. Again, just another alley view, and yet another alley view.
This was that garage we were looking at earlier, or
yeah, from the other side.
Gotcha.
From the other side, exactly. So the area, and this is standing adjacent to actually where our addition is proposed. This is looking back towards the east, I guess it is, towards the neighboring property. And I guess I skipped over the picture that shows where the addition actually is proposed. But this is just looking back, scanning back across the yard, looking towards where the development is.
Why don't you walk us through your plans?
Yeah, so obviously it's a treasured piece of architecture, which myself and actually the client is very respectful for and absolutely in love with. So anything that we do, definitely want to honor what is there and the characteristic and style that it represents. Mainly what we want to do, it's focusing on the master bathroom area on the addition that was done in 84, which is, from a function standpoint, doesn't function very well. The clients lived with it through these years, and it hasn't served them well. It's a really funky development. It steps down into this sunken bath, and so with very limited area around it, it's all ceramic tile. If you were to trip, you would fall yet not only those 2 feet, but then another 30 inches into this bathtub, and there's no windows around this either. So that's what we're trying to remedy, and it's a fairly simple fix. This is the existing roof structure, and it's just this. It's not really an octagonal. It's 10 or 12 sides, so whatever
Segmented.
that is. Yeah. So that's the roof that we're proposing to take off.
Can you hold on one second?
Sure.
Can we go back to, or can we talk about the site plan a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah.
Help everybody get their
Yeah,
orientation. This is Laguna Street here. This is what faces the street.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is Laguna Street here, and this is what faces the street. Everybody on board there?
This is the alleyway. This is the garage structure that you saw in those pictures. And the shaded area is what we're proposing. The dashed area is the footprint of what we're proposing to remove.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
It would be helpful if the applicant had a pointer instead of his finger. I noted when I watch on TV these shows, it's very difficult for people on TV to tell what building or what part you're talking about,
Okay.
so a pointer really helps.
Maybe I'll bring a chopstick for the next meeting.
I can furnish chopsticks.
So again, this dash line is the footprint of what exists as well, here, and it's just the shaded portion, which is the area that we're proposing to add back in place of that. These designations are where those pictures that are labeled are looking towards.
Okay, great. I think that gives everybody a better clue. Okay. And everybody, we're on page A2.1. Okay.
And so this, again, this is the footprint, partial floor plan of that lower floor that we're proposing to revise. And again, this dashed line is showing the footprint of what is there currently and what we're proposing to put back. It's a more traditional layout of the bathroom. and it provides just simply some natural light in there, as well as a little secondary access out into the rear yard off this little porch area that steps down into grade. And then how that's handled is basically tying back into the
Let everybody
existing.
get to that page,
Oh, I'm sorry,
A2.2.
A2.2. With another simple gable that comes off of that existing.
Barry, when you flip pages, we can't hear the applicant, so just be mindful of that, please. Thank
So
you.
again, just a simple gable. So it's just this portion that is the new portion of roof.
Okay.
This is
Everybody turn to
A3.
AB 3.1, please.
this is
Hold on a second. Okay, go ahead.
this is the elevation of the existing rear of the house. This is the segmented portion that we're proposing to remove. This is the roof line that we'd be tying into. Side view of that segmented portion, and then the other side there.
Okay. Everybody go to A3.1, please. Okay, continue. Thanks.
So again, this is the existing portion of roof line, and it's just this simple gable that's popping out that we're proposing to add new windows in front of what would be where the bathtub, and then a recessed porch doors that come out of that vanity area. Again, from this line over, except for that eave, that's all new. And again, looking back, this is the new area. All the details are meant to replicate, match materials, everything to match as this thing was part of the original structure. We want it to fit in as seamlessly and as cleanly as possible.
Okay, just a quick question. We're not into questions yet, but while we're on this sheet, how are you treating this railing here? Do you need a railing there?
No, because it's
drop-off's
only-
less than-
Yeah,
okay.
it's just a
S-
small.
No railing there. Okay. Then staff have any comments? Staff's not here. So we'll open up public comment, and I have one speaker, and that's Mr. Kellum DeForest. Mr. DeForest, come forward.
Thank you, Kellum DeForest. As everyone knows, this is an iconic house, and it says here that his project requires historic resource findings. I think for a house of this presence and age, a historic structures report should be required, and also that could reveal additions that have been made through the years since the house was built. Maybe even a historic structures report could determine who the architect was. Certainly by finding out who the original owner was and owners. I vaguely remember possibly my father, Lockwood DeForest, may have looked at advised on the garden. I'm not sure, because everything is listed by owner, by client, not by address. I am bringing up my father. Is the landscaping is supposed to be any trees, any planting to be removed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. See no other public for this item. I will close public comment and actually inquire of staff what level or degree of historic resource findings are required for this project.
Mr. Chair, the commission typically has to conclude that the alterations will not pose a negative adverse impact to the resource. So
Okay.
that's the determination. And we typically conclude our environmental review as a result of that, your review. If you can make those findings, it will be exempt from further additional studies.
Do we have, or is it our purview to require a focused letter or a historic structures report? Or, I mean, obviously it is our purview, but
Yeah, I think it would be just a question of the extent of work typically that triggers that report.
Okay.
I believe that there are minor alterations that don't deem it necessary to do that. If you have concerns about the design and the compatibility, certainly a third-party consultant could assist in analyzing those impacts. But smaller additions, I would think that we have capable reviewers to determine this.
the other, I guess, thing that enters into it is that was an addition in the first place. What is being removed was an addition. I'll go to questions. Commissioner Schellenberger, any questions?
Is there a photo of the existing north elevation that's straight on, similar to what's on the NSA 3.0?
Not straight on because there's not a real. That should be photo 8. That actually probably in photo 7. That's their label.
Do we have photo 8 down there? Commissioner Drury, Commissioner Boucher?
Oh, here it is. Here it is.
I don't think I remember going through it when
Mr. Lamone was sitting on
he
it.
was hiding it.
I'll pass it down to you in just a second. I just wanted to put it on the camera here. And that is, okay.
That's fine, that's all I was.
Okay.
And is there a reason you didn't do proposed or existing on the same sheet?
Proposed and existing,
Elevation.
Proposed.
just because they were all. Because I did 3 of them, but no other reason.
Commissioner Winnick, any questions?
Just one.
You'll get used to it. Or I'll hit you over the head.
Just one.
The one question is, and I understand in plan why you might not have, but I was wondering why on this one north elevation, the window isn't
Hey, hold on
centered.
one second. Let me get to
Oh,
that north
sorry,
elevation.
A301,
Uh-huh.
proposed north elevation is the 3 windows that are over the tub, and just consideration was given to centering those. Would just be the question.
No, the reason we did it is more of a function of the interior function. The bathtub sits there, and if you look at the plan, there's actually some towel storage at the end there, and then there's another window that wraps around that corner, which you see here. So that's what's facing out to the yard, and it was purely a function of the interior from that standpoint.
However, it is lined up with the peak, isn't it? Or was that your intent? or a
Yeah, I don't
happy
know if
accident?
that might have been an accident.
Any other questions, Commissioner Winnick?
That's all, thank
Commissioner
you.
Arias, any questions?
Yes, I have a question on
Commissioner
A3.1. I noticed that you have a roof line, jump down another roof, and jump down another roof. Did you ever consider the possibility of making that less busy by simply extending the roof, one roof across, period, instead of having this drop?
Well,
It seems
Yeah.
to me that it would be more in harmony with the overall design of the house, which has large expansions of roofs.
Well, we are tying into the existing roof line that stays in plane on this side that you can see from this elevation. And if we were to do that, then it creates a kind of a different height, plate height for us to deal with. So I guess to answer your question, that's the reason we didn't just continue this roof because it didn't seem proper for just this width of structure.
Okay. Commissioner Murray, any questions?
Yeah, when you say you're matching the materials, so you are going to match the actual shingles exactly, and also all the trims and all that?
Yes,
Okay.
and detailing.
In detailing? So that's actual wood that you're going to get?
Yes.
Okay. And it's going to be the same as what's existing?
Yes.
And the treatment of the windows are going to be that way as well?
Yeah, they will match all of the existing details, everything.
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow Commissioner Murray's question, is this in the high fire district?
I believe it is. I think they did when they just recently changed that. I think it might be. Yes.
Yes,
It is in the high fire
It's not
zone.
shown
Yeah,
that
you might have trouble with the shake siding.
Yeah. I haven't researched the different assemblies. I know in the past we've been able to do some board and batten. I haven't researched this assembly yet. But
Commissioner Sharp, any questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Drury, any questions?
Yes, I just have one. Can we infer from the photographs and the drawings that there was no extension before that rounded?
So in other words, the house ended here at
Yes.
that, or
Well,
here.
I would think.
I have Windsor Sewell's plan if you want
Yeah,
to.
let's just see that.
Let's see.
Supposed to be.
That?
It was the sewing room area. Where are we? So it was this area off of here.
There was a sleeping porch.
So
which would be
yeah,
kind of
it was
difficult.
during the '84 is where that major addition happened. Actually, the whole house went through some extensions this way and that way. So the back of the house was. I'm not sure if I can determine exactly where that was on my plan. Let's see. So it would have been. Of course, I flipped it. I think it was here in the Windsor Sewell plan. Well, actually, let me see. Yeah, the sleeping porch. It was at that line, which was here.
Thank you.
Wait,
So all this were 80.
All of this was in 80. Yeah, and I have those plans too, if you want to see that. All of that, and then there was some major additions on the kitchen area.
Commissioner Boucher, any questions? No. Okay. Commissioner Schallenberger,
Is this really the way these fascias work? It looks like in
what are you
profile.
referring to?
Go to A3.1, for example. The west and east elevations, just that profile, it looks like the fascias are above the plane of the roof. Is that really what happens with those?
Yeah, if you look at the pictures, which are floating around here
Nope,
somewhere,
I got them all right here.
there's a which is a classic kind of arts and crafts style where there's like a 2x4 up
goes
and
beyond.
the roof kind of rolls up onto that.
Okay.
Is
I'm
that the
not
best
sure.
shot?
Let me. I can't see upside down very well.
Well, put your glasses on upside down.
Yeah.
Come on.
It doesn't affect what we're looking at. I was just curious. I hadn't
Where's
seen
the
that
kind of,
detail before.
eave?
Yeah.
All the eaves kind of hid
Yeah,
by
it's like
some
a
of the landscape.
parapet
but,
almost.
No, there really isn't anything in this.
Yeah, it's kind of a classic, so that it allows for those rafter tails to kind of be expressed
I see.
rather than having something on the outside of
see.
them. It's sitting on top
Right.
of those.
Any other questions from anybody? Commissioner Murray?
Yeah. Did you show us where your bamboo and that's somewhat of enforcement?
Yeah, that got added from planning review. I don't have it on here, but it's essentially in this location right here. Where's my pencil?
This is a
Yeah, it's basically kind of here.
And that's an overheight bamboo hedge located within the interior yard setback is proposed to be reduced in height to 8 feet, which will address a violation called out in an enforcement case, 2009, so on. Bamboo over height,
And
for shame.
Joanne, correct me. That was actually kind of creeping from neighbors, right?
Okay.
I think that's been part of it.
Okay. All right, we'll go on to comments. How about starting with Commissioner Boucher?
Well, I was just taken by the fact that there's bamboo, because somebody planted bamboo across a fence for me, and we spent our whole lives
Chasing runners.
Absolutely. I really love this house, I always have, and I think that what you're doing is probably going to work well. What you're doing is lovely.
Thank you.
As I say, this to me has always been a very special house, so I would be worried if I felt it weren't being totally respected.
Commissioner Jury, any comments differing than that?
I agree with Commissioner Boucher. It's an elegant solution to that rounded problem in the back.
Okay. Will somebody, perhaps the historian on the commission, speak to the need or no need for historic structures report or focus letter? Commissioner Sharp, do you have anything to add to comments?
I think it's an excellent solution and support it as is presented.
Okay. Commissioner Murray?
Yeah, I can support. I also agree with staff that it's a small enough addition, and what's good about it is taking out kind of inappropriate part and sort of returning it back to a little to being compatible with the house at that level. If it were bigger than this, going size or something, I would definitely ask for a historic structure report. So that's my sense of it. I am concerned about matching the materials. That is just so important, because if you go down that road and it doesn't look good, that will really be almost worse than doing something different.
Agreed.
So those are my concerns.
Thank you, Commissioner Murray. Commissioner Arias, any comments other than
Yes.
what's been made?
I like it, and I would like to ask the applicant to pursue making sure that this house is preserved if for the future, because it is very special. Being in the high fire hazard area, you may have trouble with shingles because they are somewhat banned in certain areas. So I would suggest that you get that and find out exactly what it is. But I think it's a plus and a benefit to the community, and I thank you for doing it.
Commissioner Winnick, any?
I don't have a lot to add other than I think it's a big improvement over what was there, so thank you.
Commissioner Schallenberger?
Echo Commissioner Sharp's comments.
Okay. Then I guess we're looking for a motion. Most likely project design approval. Anybody want to make that motion with a time frame?
I will make that motion.
With 2-week continuance, indefinite?
Is 2 week adequate, Kent? Or indefinite?
Let's say indefinite, because I want to try to wrap it all up with the details, and some of this research might take a little bit of time with the material. So.
Okay. And I would add that this project does not cause a negative adverse impact.
Thank you.
To the historic structure.
Okay, and also if the maker of the motion would like to add the comment Commissioner Arias made that the commission appreciates and wishes the applicant to continue to protect the integrity of the house. Is that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion by Sharp, a second by Arias. All in favor?
Mr. Chair?
Aye.
I'm sorry.
Opposed?
Was there an approval granted?
PDA.
Project design?
Project design
That's what it
approval.
is, okay.
So opposed? Motion carries.
And it's to return to...
Indefinitely?
Where?
Full board.
Okay.
I think that the full board needs to look at something like this and not just consent, particularly if historic resource findings are to be made. Okay, you are halfway there.
That one's mine.
Why?
Well, those are the three. I just brought one that wasn't all folded.
I just usually take what's in front of me because that's what's been talked about.
Actually, there should be three.
No.
We have a 15-minute break.
All right, next item on the agenda is scheduled for 2:30, so I suggest that we take a 15-minute break. The commission is in recess. Meeting of Wednesday, January 18th. Next item on the agenda is the 0 block of West Mason Street. And this is a proposal to replace the structurally deficient Mason Street Bridge over Mission Creek and increase channel capacity. Our minutes from the most recent meeting, which was I don't have those minutes, so I will skip that and just announce to the rest of the commissioners. Just announce to the rest of the commissioners that Commissioner Arias and Commissioner Studing did meet with the applicant last week Friday and went through the project with them. State your names for the record and a brief presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is John Iwasiak, Principal Civil Engineer for the Public Works Department.
Welcome.
Thank you. David Black, Landscape Architect. And our presentation today will consist of two parts. My presentation will be a follow-up to our previous discussions and for the project critical elements with regards to bridge geometry and alignment. We'd like to move forward with the design of the bridge and be responsive to all the Board and Commission's comments and issues. But the bridge alignment and geometry is a critical element of the project for the design to move forward. So I'd like to address that. And then as part two of our presentation, David Black will speak to the bridge, rail, creek, walls, fencing, and color section, other things that the Commission requests us to come back with as well. So we'll be responding to each of the issues previously identified by the HLC, specifically in the December 7th meeting, and many of which of those coincide with what the Creeks Committee discussed with us and informed with us at their December 14th meeting. So again, to reiterate, the Mason Street Bridge replacement project is a complex project with numerous site constraints as identified on our plan and with many design parameters, and it's clear that there are competing needs and desires between staff, boards, and commissions and the adjacent property owners. And staff is proposing a balanced project approach that meets the federal, state, and city requirements while responding to the project stakeholders. So an important item of discussion has been the western bridge alignment, abutment and creek wall alignment, and the sycamore tree. So we're talking primarily, this edge is a critical component because it's well understood that the bridge needs to be 55 feet for the flood control, flood conveyance, and then we have a curb return to the new aligned Kimberly Street. Then we have a street width, which I'll address separately, and then a private development project, which is adjacent, which has needs and desires as well. So we're looking at all these issues and recommending the project before you. So with regards to the western abutment, the westernmost wall for this project and the westernmost alignment will give us the largest habitat expansion zone feasible, and that is of great importance to the Creek Committee, and we heard comments from the HLC on that as well. Currently it's approximately 42 feet in width. In order to move the creek wall, in order to try and preserve the tree, greatly reduces the area of the habitat expansion zone. And what was important to both the HLC and to the Creeks Committee was a sloped area. And we have previously given the Commission a section of that sloped area, and I'd just like to reiterate that in order to achieve the sloped habitat expansion zone, to accomplish the emergent wetland and to accomplish the features for the animals and for the plants, that a smaller area would reduce the ability for this to perform as intended. And so that is one of the issues associated with the western abutment and wall alignment. The other issue is that in order for us not to remove the tree, there was an analysis made of what the bridge abutment and wall configuration would need to be at the interface between the bridge and the tree. And there wasn't a viable, feasible, realistic option that we could find, and we looked and talked to many engineers in the Santa Barbara County Flood Control District and design engineers on this, and any construction near those trees, the tree has such a large root ball, and it is primarily on the landward side and also underneath the creek. But there is a 30-inch tree trunk from this tree that goes 45 degrees out over the tree, and our arborist reports and an investigation has led us to believe that 30-inch trunk will be removed, and it then compromises the tree and the viability of that tree. So those two primary factors, which is the bridge constructability, the habitat expansion zone, and the tree issues itself, lead us to conclude that the most viable option for this project is to have the bridge alignment be in the western bridge abutment alignment be in the westernmost alignment, that we do remove the tree, but replace it. In its place, we would have the propagation of the tree and new trees planted in the immediate vicinity of the tree, and also along the property. And I believe Mr. Romasanta will speak to the opportunity that we envision to working with the applicant, or with Mr. Romasanta, on planting sycamore trees on his side of the property. Also, as discussed at the last HLC meeting, the city will be acquiring 20 West Mason, and there'll be opportunity for sycamore tree plantings on the western side of the creek as well. And then with the habitat expansion zone as proposed to the south of the bridge, and with our vegetation planting plan on the north side of the bridge, there'll be further opportunities. And I believe we've shown 12 sycamore trees as going on this project. And in addition to that, staff has purchased some properties as part of the lower emission quick flood control project and for other bridge replacement projects. For example, Ortega Street and Haley de la Vena Street, we have properties, and we are going back there to plant more trees along within city acquired properties, and we would like to do that for future acquired properties as well. So you know that sycamore tree planting along the lower emission creek flood control project is of importance to us, and we'd like to get your feedback on some of those issues. So with regards to bridge width, we were asked to analyze and propose the narrowest bridge width feasible. And we have done that. We have looked at the federal requirements for the bridge width, and we found there was a very strong language that we found, and I believe I'm paraphrasing it. It said, in no case shall, pretty strong language that said, in no case shall the bridge width be narrower than the road width that leads to the bridge. And so we do have the Lawn Trotter Development Project that is proposed, and we do have a $3.5 million bond that gives us the ability to construct those public improvements if the Lawn Trotter project does not move forward. And we are, the proposed road width for Mason Street here is 36 feet. For information, the existing Kimberly road width is 32 feet. So we have studied to see what is the narrowest paved width that is allowable per the federal requirements for this bridge, and now we're determining that it needs to match the existing or proposed road width in this case. And so the bridge width would be 36 feet from face of curb to face of curb. The sidewalk we've analyzed to try and get the narrowest bridge. We've analyzed what is the minimum sidewalks that the staff would propose, and we had shown a 12-foot sidewalk on the south side. This could be reduced to, staff can support we're proposing 6-foot wide sidewalk here with no parking on the bridge. Now on the north side of the bridge, there are turning movement and sight distance and traffic geometrics that come into play, and our traffic engineer has done the calculations, and the requirement is to maintain an 8.5-foot sidewalk on the north side for those reasons. And so with also the bridge rail width we had previously identified as a 2-foot wide rail, but we would now propose a 1.5-foot wide rail, and we can talk about that in David's presentation about the rail features. But in all, we have reduced our bridge width from 60 feet to 53.5 feet as proposed now. With regards to the HLC comment on sloped creek banks, So the proposed bridge alignment does result in the largest habitat expansion zone for 15 West Mason frontage. And that's important because of those sloping issues with regards to emergent wetland and for animals to be able to escape out of the creek during extreme events. And so the plan reflects those key elements, and that was very important, again, from the Creeks Committee standpoint. So let me catch my notes. So the landscaped area also between Kimberly and the new creek wall, we're trying to maximize the landscaping there, but the issue on this alignment was the height, to reduce the height of the wall to the maximum extent feasible. We do have an existing manhole feature which complicates that, but we did many, and that was one of the reasons that I asked the chair and Mr. Is to meet, was that we do have extensive work that we've done to analyze and to do cross-sections with regards to how does what we're proposing now play out when this future habitat expansion zone, and it's shown approximately in this vicinity, when this future habitat expansion zone, which will emulate this lower habitat expansion zone, when this channel widening occurs at a future yet to be determined date, we didn't want to have something done here that would preclude the best option for habitat expansion zone to the north of our project. That would be in a subsequent channel project. And so we've done research and concluded that this manhole in its configuration as shown, or in this vicinity, would be the best location for this manhole, because what that allows is the wall height to go down to virtually the bottom of the channel level, so that we can have a wall height that actually lessens as we go upstream, and that gives us the opportunity to emulate the habitat expansion zone that we are desiring to achieve downstream, so that these two would mirror each other, and it would only occur if we had this reduction of wall height, which is predicated by the manhole location. So with that, I'd like to show you how Section 3 would be the progression. We would start with Section 3, where we show where a manhole and its magnitude and size. It's a 54-inch pipe where this manhole comes from, and we would expect that ground cover would cover this manhole and the pipe, and that we would have a 2-to-1 slope, and that would govern the height of the wall, and that's closer to the bridge. Then as we progress upstream, we can reduce the height of the wall, and that 2-to-1 slope is restricted by the sidewalk elevations at the street. But we are getting down towards where we lead to the third, or the elevation number 1, which gets us down to near the creek level, and the wall actually goes to 0. We'll have to have a transition between here and the Gabions wall, some details to be determined. But what we're achieving by getting to this level is that we are setting ourselves up for what I feel is the best scenario for the habitat expansion zone to mirror it as we're planning, so that it would mirror it in the future habitat expansion zone over the creek channel widening project. So again, with neighborhood compatibility, that was another topic of discussion, that the proposed sidewalk in the bridge, again, was proposed to be reduced to 6 feet. And one of the issues that the Creeks Committee suggested was carrying this 6 feet through to this. In this area of the intersection, there's no parking allowed at the end of the intersection. So that would allow us to carry the 6-foot sidewalk to the end of the habitat expansion zone, and actually expanding this habitat expansion zone another 6 feet, if that's what the HLC would like to see. We could actually accommodate that. Another perspective of that is, if you're coming from State Street, this widened sidewalk and tree well area as part of the Law and Trotter project, and there'll be a transition as part of this project. The question is, where does the 6-foot sidewalk start? If we did start it at this point, we could expand the habitat expansion zone another 6 feet, but at 42 feet, that's approximately 250 square feet. So it's a rather significant contribution if that's viewed as being desirable or optimum. Okay, and then neighborhood compatible bridge railing will also be discussed and proposed. So that's my presentation, part of the presentation, and I feel that it's very important for us to know where the HLC direction is with regards to bridge alignment and geometry, as that's what is needed for us to move forward with the design. So I'd like to get a sense of that. But
before Mr. Black goes into his presentation, one question for you, Mr. Wozniak. Would you please talk about the width of the eastern side of Kimberly Street, the sidewalk and so on?
Thank you. The existing distance between the face of curb and the property line on Kimberly that exists there now is 9 feet. And we propose to continue that 9 feet throughout the frontage of the 16 West Mason Street property as part of this project. So our previous version showed an 11.5 feet with a parkway, but we have revised the plan here to show a 9-foot wide sidewalk with tree wells, approximately 3.5 foot tree wells. And that is what is existing on the west side of Kimberly Avenue to the north of this project. So we were proposing that neighborhood compatibility issue be continued for the street, and I'd be interested in hearing your take on that. Another site constraint, if I may, is the project that is proposed at 16 West Mason, and so staff has been working with Mr. Romasanta and his team to have our designs be. We're working together to try and achieve mutual interest and also to achieve individual project goals. And so Mr. Romasanta, I believe, will express his opinions of the project, but my understanding is that we have resolved any significant differences and that we are moving forward in a cooperative manner with the geometry as proposed, which leads me to the final point of the road width and what was termed the one-way issue. The loop here of Kimberly and down Chapala, which includes now the new Chapala Bridge project, the narrowest width that we have on that run, my understanding is that it is this 32 feet here on Kimberly. So there would be a bottleneck, so to speak, of a reduction here. But staff can support this being its narrowest width of 26 feet. That is what we have proposed. And so this project isn't proposing a one-way street. It is accommodating that someday it may not preclude a two-way. So an applicant may be on their own project may consider a one-way project, and they would have to deal with the issues. But what is before staff is the issue of what is the narrowest width of Kimberly Avenue that staff can support, and the determination we have made due to site distance and turning movements at this intersection is 26 feet. So so you know, the narrowest that would need to be for a one-way street is 20 feet. So the difference we were talking about is a 6 feet between a one-way street of 20 feet and what can accommodate two-way of 26 feet. It wouldn't be enough. 6 feet is not enough to protect the tree. We don't believe, in accordance with what the arborist reports and with the bridge design engineers that we have talked to. So we didn't see that as the way to save the tree. And so what we are striving for is a balanced project and a way to get the project done in accordance with the previous approvals and for the long-term benefit of the neighborhood and the project. So with that, take any more questions with relation to geometry and alignment.
Why don't we approach it that way then, and then we'll let you go into your... Commissioner Boucher, any questions on the geometry or alignment?
I'll come up with one later. But
Okay. Commissioner Drury, any questions?
Yeah, a few questions. What does acquiring 20 West Mason Street mean, and what is there now?
Craig, would you please pass that photo?
20 West Mason Street is a single-family residence property, and it is immediately adjacent to the construction of the bridge. And we've done a vibration study analysis, that tells us that we will be impacting that house significantly with the construction and the pile driving and the work associated with this project. And as such, we will be purchasing the property. We will purchase the property, and so that is in the right-of-way phase. We're currently in the design phase. The next phase of the project will be the right-of-way phase, and we would be working on the acquisition or the purchasing of that property. It'll become a city property, which gives us the ability to plant some trees and to do some things on the property as public improvements or as improvements. And then we would sell the property after the project was completed and the house was restored.
So the house would not be removed, it would be restored at some point.
The house will be protected in place. That's correct.
And could you tell me what the width of the creek is below the bridge? What it'll
Currently?
Be?
I think it's 35 feet. Is approximately 35 feet is my understanding of what the existing width is currently, and would be needing to be widened to 50.
It goes to 55.
20 more feet.
I've got a couple more. Could you? Is there a sort of a codified description of an emergent wetland?
I'm sure there is. I
mean,
could look to our staff.
It may be clear on its face, but is there some?
Or David.
Well, because there's no wetland there now.
I'm not a biologist, botanist, but in talks with Creeks Division, and obviously they're expert in that area, and it was actually at their request that we even developed this area. But essentially, what it is, it's a collection of species, particular species that are adapted to being down in the water, if you will. And currently, according to the Creeks Division, we have very few examples of that up and down the creek, and so they saw this as a real opportunity to develop a new habitat using those species of plants. And the species, individual species, are located there on the plan, or illustrated on the plan, but that's essentially what it is.
Okay, then my last question is, how will the construction affect the tree if it was not removed? Well, I mean, what physically would happen? And it's not, I also should, let me back up a minute. It's not a tree. It's a number of trees, and they're pretty substantial. Anyway.
We have had a couple different arborists, look at the tree issues. And so we've been informed that it actually is one root ball, one tree with 5 trunks is the way it was described in the arborist's report. And so what's needed to be done on this project is to remove the existing bridge abutment wall or construct a new bridge abutment wall. And so that construction and removal is immediately adjacent to the existing tree, or at least some of the trunks of the adjacent tree. And one of our arborist reports states that we need to have certain clearances in an attempt to try and preserve the tree. But that report also states that any construction that we do is going to significantly impact the tree, and that report also says that even if we try and protect some of the tree, that they recommend the 30-inch tree trunk be removed. And so that really compromises the tree. So even in an effort to preserve what could potentially be preserved, it changes the character and the viability of that tree. And so the 30-inch trunk is the largest trunk, and it is the one that goes 45. It actually inhibits the flow if it was left alone. It wouldn't be, we don't see that it would be allowed to remain.
So I guess you could also say that removing the tree changes its character permanently.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions, Commissioner Sherry? Commissioner Sharp, any questions?
Yes. You mentioned that you're required to have the bridge width be the same curb to curb as Mason Street, which I believe has parking on both sides. Is that correct?
I don't believe there's parking on the north side currently. There is parking on both sides on the west side.
The
correct.
36 feet includes parking on both sides, and I mentioned last meeting that for me to go across the new De La Vina Bridge is just a massive amount of concrete, which is not, in my estimation, Santa Barbara. You don't need 18 feet on both sides for one-way parking. A couple of bulb outs would reduce the width of Mason Street to where you could reduce the width of the concrete curb to curb on the bridge to a more reasonable width. And I wondered if that, it seems to me that matching 36 on the bridge and 36 on Mason Street, which includes parking on both sides, isn't an apples kind of comparison.
Mr. Chair and Committee Member Sharp, Commissioner Member Sharp, I think you're right in your assessment in that it doesn't seem intuitive that we need 36 feet for just traveled way and no parking. However, there is a federal requirement that the bridge not be narrower than the approach widths. So while we could pursue any possibility of reducing it, if this project is a $10.7 or $8 million project, 99% funded by the federal government grant, we need to meet their requirements. We can ask the question, but as I stated earlier, the regulation as it's written says, in no case shall the bridge be narrower than the paved way to the bridge. So we would pursue the narrowest pavement width that we're allowed. But my understanding is that we are required to maintain that 36-foot width of pavement. If there was a way that we can get an exception to that, I will pursue that.
So it specifically says paved way, not travel way.
Correct. That's my understanding.
Well, obviously that makes no sense to me, and we're trying to protect our neighborhoods to be very much as they are now, and I think that 36 feet for 18 feet each way for one way of travel is exorbitant, unnecessary, and I would certainly try to clarify this with the federal government to get a more reasonable width, and there is no reason to have an additional 8 feet on both sides or 6 feet on both sides, which is for parking on.
Mr. Chair, I suggest that if the HLC would be, when we're ready to make comments, final comments, et cetera, we are okay with pursuing the narrowest bridge width feasible or possible. We're okay with having the HLC as a comment or as an issue that staff continue to pursue to the maximum extent allowed the narrowest pavement width. We were willing to do that, but we wanted to be prepared with a response for the HLC in direct response to try and make this bridge the narrowest they can. We believe that we've done our research, and we can ask the question, but I think I know the answer, but I would certainly be willing to ask and pursue this further.
Thank you.
What is the existing width of the bridge?
I believe it's approximately 35 feet. 24, thank you. It's 24 feet. It's narrow.
Commissioner Murray, any questions?
Not right now.
Okay. Commissioner Rios?
Not right now.
Commissioner Winnick? Commissioner Schellenberger, questions?
Can you just clarify what is the curb-to-curb width of Kimberly at this, as shown here?
The curb-to-curb width as shown would be 26 feet.
Okay, that's 26.
And it was, again, the existing width was 32. So this would be the bottleneck or the narrowest width on the street.
I see. Okay. And to follow up Commissioner Sharp's questions regarding width, you mentioned cost. Wouldn't the cost be reduced if the width were reduced? I mean, less surface area of bridge?
The cost, I'm sorry, just for clarification, the cost of the bridge would be reduced if the width was reduced?
It seems there.
To some degree, that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
And can you tell me, what is this heavy line indicating the bearing span point? And a follow-up on that is, what does that look like underneath? In other words, is it just a straight vertical wall to that span point, or what is happening underneath the bridge?
So the dark lines do represent the bridge abutments, which are the load-bearing components of the bridge. And so it's a clear span. So the face of this abutment would be a vertical wall underneath.
Well, we'll talk about that in comments then. But And then, so typically, I think, on moving on to the sycamore tree, just to get my head around the complete impacts here, drip line is generally a rule of thumb, root ball line. So I'm seeing, it looks like, I mean, that impact would be massive, removing and then replacing an abutment in that location. Is that a typical, David, maybe you can answer that. That's basically the root ball?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's sort of an odd root ball because it's actually growing out of the side
Right.
of the bank, and
Right.
roots are coming up under the bridge.
And it's wrapping the abutment?
It is.
Yeah, okay. That's it.
Okay. Questions from anyone else?
I have a question.
Commissioner Rios?
I would appreciate it if you'd expand a little bit more on the proposal to plant the trees. You mentioned planting back 12 trees plus where and moving further up other sites. Do you have anything more specific than what you described?
So off-project sites.
Project,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair and committee member, question member. Yes, it's evolving, by the way. We are recognizing after the completion of the Ortega Bridge project, we just completed that project and had a ribbon cutting, and we recognized that the site could use some trees, and we would like to embellish that, enhance the creek corridor by planting trees on properties that the city has acquired or will acquire. So we are going to work with the Creeks Division and the Creeks Committee on a tree planting plan for the Lower Mission Creek corridor, so that we can take opportunities to enhance the corridor with trees and appropriate plantings as part of a plan. So we'd like to develop this plan and working with.
So you don't have any solid numbers of trees or anything?
No, we don't, but we'll be developing them soon.
And you will also be developing a plan that will protect those trees in the future?
Thank you. That's a great question, because, yes, the intent here is that once we acquire a property such as like we're doing at 20 West Mason, we want to be able to plant the trees and have them thrive. And so we would be working on a mechanism that would run with the property, some type of either easement or agreement or some
Deed restriction.
Deed restriction, some document that would ensure the preservation of our investment.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Then I will open public comment.
Chair Sitting,
I got
I
one
just
more
want to point out
question.
that the project is proposing 13 sycamore trees to replace the one sycamore tree on the project side.
It's actually 12.
Is it 12? Excuse me, 12.
And I'm actually not going to open public comment, and I'm going to hear Mr. Black.
Thank you.
Mr. Black, apologize.
Thank you very much. I'm going to address some of the additional design components as part of the project. We'll look at the creek walls, the railings on those walls, and then also the bridge railings themselves.
Why don't you use a pointer?
I'll use a pointer. I think relative to the landscape, I think John's given you sort of a basic overview and the palette of proposed plant material, both for the creek banks and then the emergent wetland areas are well documented here. I would point out, too, just relative to landscape, that the actual limit of the project is at this location here, but because of the fact that the city would be acquiring this property, and probably the contractor would end up using this as a staging area and provide access to the creek, the city would own it. So the city is now considering being able to plant this area as well. We won't be planting any additional trees. There are 2 existing oak trees here, but obviously down the road when the Lower Mission Creek improvements move forward, this area would be directly impacted. But in the interim, I felt it might be a good idea to sort of plant this, so we would carry the same riparian palette here, and this would be fully planted out. So I just point that out as sort of an added bonus, if you will. Relative to the creek walls, these shaded areas up and downstream of the bridge itself represent the vertical creek walls, and they also represent the sort of the extent to which this project will be constructing these walls. So there's this one on the west side, and then this is a wall here, which is best illustrated in this section here that John's already shown you. So it in fact is only about 4 feet high at the top of the slope. But I think one has to sort of look at the downstream portion of the construction in the context of what will be constructed either part or in future of this project. I think all of you are familiar with the Lower Mission Creek Reach 1A, which is approved and has now been constructed and is illustrated on the second sheet. But so that part, that second phase, if you will, from the pedestrian bridge at the Harbor View Inn will come up and interface with this project here. And then upstream, this would be the extent as shown in those sections of the vertical creek walls. I will show you on sheet 2.
Yeah,
We have a.
it wasn't originally submitted.
Oh,
Will you put one there and one there, please?
and I have an extra one here too.
Let's not fight now.
Felt like that.
Relative to the walls that have been constructed in the Lower Mission Creek, this is called Reach 1A, Phase 1, and then Phase 2. This goes up to the pedestrian bridge at the Harbor View Inn, and then the second phase would extend from that same pedestrian bridge on up to Mason Street. So there'd be an interface. We anticipate that the look and the design of the walls as they interface with the Mason Street Bridge would be as shown here. I have to say that I wasn't totally pleased with the way it turned out. Although in a general sense, I think this represents the intent of HLC in terms of the modularness of the faux sandstone block, and then with the wrought iron fence atop it. So we are anticipating that this same design will extend from that pedestrian bridge, phase 2, and on up to the bridge. So this same these vertical walls here and here would reflect that same design vocabulary, if you will, that simulated faux sandstone scored. We're not real clear exactly whether the same construction technique will be used. That particular one, if you remember, was done with reinforced shotcrete, and then it was cut and formed and colored to effect sort of a faux sandstone block. So here and here would have that same design approach, same wrought iron rail as exists down there now. Upstream of the bridge itself, same design approach. We may take a totally different approach in terms of the actual construction, but I think the comments that were put forth at the time that the Reach 1A was approved in terms of getting that larger module, kind of getting away from that form-liner module that I think some people are not real happy with. But the intent then would be sort of to represent that same large module sandstone wall. The difference with the upstream side would be, well, we have a requirement for 42-inch high, some sort of fencing on here. And that's why we have the one particular design for downstream. It was my idea to, if you remember, the Chapala Street Bridge is just another block up here. That project has been brought before the commission on one occasion at least, and at that time, as I remember, there was a pedestrian rail that was approved actually by the commission. It's sort of it sort of mimics, if you will, the current railing on the pedestrian bridge up at the railroad station across the one that goes to the Potter Hotel. Has that same sort of pipe, 2-inch diameter pipe with T's and what have you, and then it's got vertical pickets. This is something that's been reviewed by this commission already and approved. So it would be my suggestion that we would consider this particular design for the top of the vertical walls from Mason all the way up to Chapala. So then in effect, Mason would be sort of the transition from one wrought iron fence to this one, because otherwise, obviously we're going to get up to Chapala, and we'd be meeting this anyway. So why not just bring it all the way down? And it's sort of consistent with some thoughts about having the creek walls and elements look as though they might have been built at a different time. So that being said, that's essentially what we're proposing. Relative to the bridge railing itself, the concrete railing on the bridge, the city has at least suggested that we use the same design that was recently completed for Ortega. I think it was done quite successfully. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback from the neighbors. If any of you have not seen it, I suggest you go up and take a look. It has a very nice sort of scale to it. It has a nice residential quality to it. Here's a photograph of it, obviously. This is the design that we started with to develop this, and we're suggesting that perhaps it could be considered for Mason Street as well. We put together a sort of a variation on that, if that appealed to anyone, just using instead of your vertical openings, sort of an arched opening and recessed on the end pilasters, but same scale, obviously. But anyway, I would ask that you consider using this. It's far enough away so that it has, and if you go back to our original approach to this is actually a modification, if you will, of the original 1915 bridge at Ortega. The only difference being that there were no openings, but essentially the design is the same. It didn't have this relief on the pilasters. But so I thought that it still paid homage to some of the historic character of the bridge, but with some modifications. So we'd like to sort of consider this as well.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. And questions from the Commission? Commissioner Boucher, any questions about landscape or bridge rail?
No questions.
Commissioner Drury?
Well, I'm sorry. Some days I'm denser than other days. It seems to me that if you have Mission Creek at a certain width enclosed in these walls, and you're going to build, even though you have I believe they're going to be grounded in gamions, you're going to build a habitat. I can't imagine that we've had several 100-year storms in the last 10 years or so. That one of those big storms is not going to just come and take this emergent wetland out to sea. I can't imagine. I don't see anything. I don't see any place, because the east side of that, the southeast side of that bridge is a historic landmark, right, or a structure of merit. I think it's the old California Garage. So that can't be moved.
It's being
removed. What's that?
It's being removed.
Chair Sitting, this Commission found in a subsequent report that the original report was an error, that the building has been substantially altered and no longer represents the historic period.
So that's the
So the
justification
15
for
West
removing
Mason
it.
is being removed.
That's too bad. Thank you.
Commissioner Sharp, any questions? I have a couple of questions. What is the height of the face of this wall?
If memory serves me, I believe, John, I think it's around 13, 14 feet.
Starts at 13 and goes down to 0,
Yeah,
basically.
and same on this side as well, here
Okay.
at this location.
And did I understand that this wall would eventually connect to the State Street Mission Creek wall?
Yeah. This is kind of what it looks like now.
Okay, so you're
Yes.
ending this project's wall somewhere in here.
Correct.
Then eventually you're going to connect from here to wherever that other picture went.
All the way down to the
All the way
pedestrian
down to
bridge.
the- uh-huh.
Yeah.
No, the one on top. There. Oh, no, that's not it.
And we don't have a
doesn't
picture.
matter. Here you go. There. No.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
And that'll be a separate project.
Okay.
Perhaps.
And then the plans say that this is a wall that's 6 inches above grade, and I think, David, you said 4 feet above grade?
4 feet above grade at this side.
On the downhill side, 6
Correct.
inches above grade on this
Right.
side. Okay.
California Hotel would back up to this.
Uh-huh. Well, California Hotel ends somewhere back in here, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, in their parking lot, yes.
Commissioner Murray, any questions?
No, I wanted to hear what the subcommittee
It wasn't really a subcommittee. It was just an informal meeting, but I'll be happy to discuss that, and I think we should let everybody get through their questions, and then I'll wrap that up. Any questions?
No, I don't.
Commissioner Villas, any questions?
I have one question. When was the last time we had a 100-year flood?
100 years ago? No.
No, they don't come every
I-
one.
oh.
Yeah. We have not had a 100-year flood
In the 90s?
in years.
I don't recall the 100-year. I know that a couple of the major storm events, like 1995, for example, I thought I recall, or from my memories right, it was termed to be a 50, 60-year flood event.
Yeah, that was,
So there's a couple of those.
but we've never had a 100-year.
But I don't recall when the last 100-year event.
Let's keep
Okay.
the discussion to one person, please.
In context, the creek currently has a flood capacity of a 6-year storm event, which we are improving with the Lower Mission Creek Flood Control Project to upgrade that to a 20-year flood capacity. So even the improved project will not be able to convey the 100-year flood event.
I have a question on the garage, that has been changed so it's no longer a structure. Who approved the changes?
This commission.
No, the original changes that brought it out of.
Who
historical
approved the
context.
original changes?
Sorry, I have no idea.
I can tell you that the landmarks did. So that is something that we need to learn. Don't approve changes because it can come back to bite you.
Commissioner Murray, question?
Yeah, I wanted to know how big are these trees that you're proposing, the sycamore? What size would they be?
24 inch.
Well, I think the city is committed to start propagating the trees now, and I would anticipate at the time of construction that they could be 24-inch box, maybe larger. I'm not sure.
Commissioner Winnick, questions?
Yeah, I have a question, David. On the bridge abutment, I was trying to tell from the photographs, you talked about the historic context of the Ortega Bridge. I'm kind of curious about the historic context of this bridge for the variance. What is the historic context? Is there before?
Well, I don't know.
Chair Sitting, members of the commission, I don't believe this bridge is historic. It's wood railing right now, I believe. Yeah, and it's has
That
no.
doesn't mean it wouldn't be historic.
Well, that's true, but I'm just saying it was found to have no historical significance. It's pretty recent construction as these things go.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schellenberger, questions?
The palette hasn't changed, correct?
Has not.
Just the number of trees, the sycamore.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So when we met with Mr. Wozniak on Friday, and that was Commissioner Rios and myself, we talked mainly about the tree, the sycamore removal, and both of us, correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Rios, felt that the removal of that tree would probably serve the greater good of the populace. In particular, if we were to get a number of mitigation sycamores along Mission Creek, the whole reach of Mission Creek. Mission Creek is somewhat deficient in that habitat sort of value, and we felt that the addition of more trees off project would benefit more than trying to preserve that tree, that one tree. We were very concerned during that meeting about the height of this wing wall or cheek wall there, if you will, along the west side of Mission Creek, north of the bridge. And we talked to Mr. Wozniak about what we could do to bring the height of that down. And we talked about moving the manhole up into the street or moving it to a different location so that the outfall would be somewhere up here. But I'm hearing the applicant now say that they don't really want to do anything in here that would preclude continuing this wall here, which I think is unfortunate because that 13.5-foot wall, it's 13.5 feet here, decreases to 0, is a pretty tall wall. Granted, we're going to have that here, and there's no ifs, ands, or no ways to reduce that height, but that's a pretty tall wall on both sides there. We also discussed the HEZ, the habitat expansion zone, and we did feel that increasing the width out to where the 6-foot sidewalk line would be beneficial. So these two commissioners were in support of that. Certainly we were in support of reducing the width of the bridge, but as Mr. Wozniak explained, the width had to match the width of the roadway. Now, I'd like some clarification on if it's roadway or travelway, and I think Mr. Sharp brought up that, and he'll probably bring that up in his comments. We also talked about reducing the width of the sidewalk. This point right here of the bridge rail cannot change because of sight line issues here. But if this were to maybe be more in scale with the width of a pedestrian sidewalk, which is about 6 feet, we thought that would be more beneficial. That didn't change. We also talked about the width of this sidewalk on Kimberly, proposed at 9 feet. We thought it would be better at 6 feet, but if it's at 6 feet, we would be losing those street trees more than likely, or we would not be able to plant those street trees. What that does to reduce that to 6 feet, it gives more property to this adjacent property, which is, I think, a beneficial thing. And I think lastly, we talked about the width of the bridge rail. Originally it was proposed at 2 feet, and it's been reduced to 1.5 feet. Commissioner Rios, does that pretty much sum it up?
Yeah, pretty much. I've done a lot of thinking.
Is your microphone on?
No, I turned it off and that one. I've done a lot of thinking since then regarding the tree and the impacts and the level of storms flooding that we have had and its survivability in a major flooding, which could occur at any time, because it doesn't say just because it's a 50-year flood, it occurs once every 50 years. We also talked about making sure that the fencing was not to the ground level, and that would be a minor detail that would be looked in later on, but it would allow animals to move within the preserve areas, yeah. There was some concern also on the part of us that there be a safety. The creek can be a conduit for transients and other people, and so it's something that needs to be also addressed, the safety factor for the surrounding residents. I live on a creek, and I know what can happen on that when things happen in the creek bed and off the creek bed. So there was safety concern, the animal migration ability, and still some concern about the tree. Thank you.
Okay. Is this portion of Mission Creek almost year-round in water?
Typically, it's in water. It's when we have a breach.
It has to do with the tidal.
The lagoon, the Mission Creek Lagoon at the ocean, the sand blocks it from discharging. So occasionally that breaches, and it typically happens after larger, significant rains. But generally speaking, it is wet there, and that prohibits transients and others from
unless they're swimmers.
We haven't heard of a history of any transient behavior down there.
Well, question from Commissioner Schellenberger.
What is the minimum two-way traffic bridge width for the federal government? I mean, what's their
highway design standards? For the federal highway design standards, what's the minimum?
Mr. Chair, the minimum bridge width, I believe, is that pavement width that we are talking about.
Well, I understand. What if a street didn't exist and this is all new? What would be the width, the minimum width they would allow for a brand new street and bridge?
The road width for the city, it's we have to determine we have to factor into all the street design parameters. And so I'm not aware of a minimum two-way width. I know the minimum one-way width is 20 feet, and that's a fire department requirement. They need their room for 2 vehicles to pass, generally speaking. So in a minimum width distance for this 26 feet. We're talking about many factors that lead us to that number. Now, the question is, what is the minimum bridge width? And it's whatever the minimum road width. So we do have roads in this city that are 20 feet. Potentially even some that are less. But the new roads that I've seen that have been allowed, let's say in the Riviera and the like, I've seen road widths of as narrow as 20 feet. And the bridge width has to match the road width.
Okay. And then follow-up to that is the federal standards for, you're calling it the approach. There must be some length of approach. I mean, it's not going to be infinite, right? So in other words, is it 100 feet to that span point? Is it 200 feet? Is it a mile? I don't know. I'm just wondering what that length of the approach that's governing that width is. So I don't know if you.
We'll explore that question. I don't have the answer, I'm sorry for that now. But again, the Lawn Trotter project is proposing to change the road features with regards to State Street and Mason Street up to our bridge project. And so we are marrying the two. And so the proposed road throat width for the vehicular movements at State and Mason are proposed to be the 36-foot width, city standard width.
Any other questions from commissioners? None, then I'll open public comment. And first to comment is Mark Romasanto, followed by Callum DeForest.
Hello, I'm Mark Romasanto, representing the Romasanto Family Trust. I've worked with John quite extensively on this project. I support what he has proposed before you. I think it's an unfortunate part of the project that sycamore tree has to go, but I think it does have to go. We would like to see Kimberly not as wide as it is, and the sidewalk not as wide as it is, but John has indicated that those are the minimums that they can live with, especially with the tree wells. Less width means less acquisition from the city to us, so that's a benefit to everybody if we can get it less, but I understand it might not be able to get less. They are showing some trees on our property. As I've told John, I'm happy to have trees on our property. There are a number of details to work out, including utilities that are in place, utilities that will be put in place when the existing power poles are underground, including existing fire lines that will have to be relocated when the next reach of this goes up to the bridge. So the drawings indicating trees on our property, I support. I'm not able to at this point say that is exactly where they'll be or how many that will be there, but whatever is feasible to put on our property, we will accommodate one way or another once all the details are worked out. So again, I support the project. I think he's worked really hard on it. It is a flood control project. I do agree with the comment about the wetland riparian areas being washed out at times, because I have been down there in 94, 95, and anything that's along the bank gets ripped out. It doesn't matter if it's behind gabions, if it's protected by a small wall. If the water gets to it and the water's rushing at 40 or 50 miles an hour, it's going to go down the creek and be in the ocean.
Especially when refrigerators roll over it.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think the ideas are great, but realistically, when storms roll through here, they can do damage.
And, in all honesty, that is part of the ecological process of
Right,
a creek.
exactly.
There's-
Now, as far as Mason Street, right now there is parking only on the Hotel California side, but it is pull-in parking, not parallel parking. So you can say there's parking on both sides because it takes up just as much room. Now, the Lawn Trotta / Ritz-Carlton / whatever it's called these days project does actually back up all the way to this. They have some support buildings and some support structures all the way back to that wall, so that wall is kind of important. And as far as this wall being tall and vertical, it needs to be tall and vertical here and die as quick as it can. But I think he's done a good job, and I support the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosanto. Mr. DeForest, followed by Eddie Harris. And that is all I have. Mr. DeForest.
Get settled in here. Okay. Oh, I don't know whether the 94, 95 flood was considered a 100-year flood, but certainly there was a 100-year flood in 1912 that washed out all the bridges on Mission Creek. To answer that question, oh, I know, but I've read about it. I heard about it too. The text of the arborist report should be presented to this committee so they could see for themselves what the problems are, rather than getting it secondhand. I believe the federal requirements can be amended for historic bridge sites, and there are numerous examples, and that needs to be explored. I think, obviously, this is a historic area, and this is a historic site. I don't know whether it meets all federal requirements of a historic site, but that should be explored. There's certainly plenty of bridges in the Santa Barbara area, especially those that have been landmarked, not so much in the city but in the county, or just look at Mission Canyon Road to the to the Botanic Garden or on Los Canoas. All those bridges that were put in the teens, the road narrows. Excuse me. The history of the Mason Street house would be useful. I would like to see it, especially, and maybe that would, some history would indicate why is it so close to Mission Creek, and what did Mission Creek change its course after the house was built? That's a question that might be of interest. Then the last item I have is public access, and it's been referred to. Public access to the creek bank habitat that is going to be produced by this project should be restricted, because that's going to, if people are wandering down to the creek, down this bank, it's going to greatly damage the planting that is put there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. Mr. Harris, followed by Leanne French.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Eddie Harris, and I'm representing Santa Barbara Urban Creeks Council.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I'm here again to talk about shading and about trees, and I'm encouraged to hear some of the talk I've heard today about replacement of trees. Probably the main, the most important thing you could do with this project to make it environmentally acceptable is to make sure there's abundant trees and adequate shading for the creek. By widening the creek, you make it more difficult to adequately shade, and the shading is important to maintain the water temperatures within a safe range to support fish. And with the ongoing efforts that the city of Santa Barbara is making to restore steelhead runs, this makes it of very, very critical importance for this project, not just for this project, but for the entire reach of the Lower Mission Creek flood control efforts. Throughout those planning efforts for the flood control project, the public was advised that there would be a greenbelt presence and a vegetated presence along the creek, and I'm encouraged by hearing some of the remarks that have been made today by staff, the engineering staff, and I just want to emphasize that that wherever possible, to look at things carefully to make sure there's room for trees and for shading. In addition to that, the sloped banks are very important. So wherever possible, sloped banks should be part of this project. And realigning of the street, wherever it might be possible. The one-way street on Kimberly would be probably advisable. I think I would recommend narrowing Kimberly as much as possible in order to accommodate shading and trees and native vegetated habitat. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Ms. French? And then public comment will be closed.
Hi, I'm Leanne French. Thank you for letting me speak.
Welcome.
I'm here on behalf of the Creeks Advisory Committee, and I share a collective perspective on this project. They have not had the full benefit of, the group has not had the full benefit of this briefing, so some of our concerns are being addressed, steps as we go. So I sit here encouraged by the direction. You've been listening. It's wonderful. Thank you very much. First and foremost, we're sad to see the Sycamore go and really appreciate the efforts that have been spent trying to find ways to address that, and are thrilled with the expansion of the number of trees up and down the creek that would be added if we do lose the Sycamore. And just the fact that we've made the effort collectively to look at all the different options is terrific. Thank you very much. The first comment has to do with considering design that's presented in the meeting that significantly increases the habitat zone. So we would be very much in favor of this expansion here. So, and the more we can obviously narrow this, I'm repeating what everybody else has said, but narrowing the sidewalks, narrowing the roadway in both angles where we can extend these gives us room for more trees, more slope on those banks. So keep going. We like the direction that it's headed. That would be terrific. A reinforcement that there's no vehicle parking allowed on the bridge, and I think this design represents that direction, so thank you. Minimum width of Kimberly, we've obviously taken it down, pinch zone at 26 now. If there's an opportunity to reconsider that, or the width of the sidewalk, we'd be in favor of that. I don't know if the landowner, Mr. Romansano, would consider putting the trees along his property line as opposed to where it would allow us to limit the width of that sidewalk. Would be another way. Yes, we want the trees. Maybe it doesn't have to be in the sidewalk. The group as a whole hopes that there's an opportunity to consider relocating that 54-foot storm drain. I believe that's here. Upstream, I think you may have spoken about it before I got in. And evidently there's an abandoned section of pipe. Is there possibility to remove that pipe?
We'll investigate that. It's possible. We'll see if it's a benefit. If there's a benefit to removing it, we would certainly consider it.
Okay. It seems like if the construction's happening at this time, it would be the time to look at those possibilities. The hope is that if we could remove the pipe, that we may be able to expand the slope of the creek bank from Kimberly Avenue to the creek on the upside, this portion in particular. And then the last comment from the group, I'm representing the group, so bear with me, recommending an analysis of the rock riprap that would be added to ensure that there's a consideration of the tidewater goby. I'm not a biologist in particular, but I believe the way the riprap is done can affect the animals. So that would we want to make sure to put that in the thinking so that the methods are going to be consistent with that species. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris, or Ms. French. Yes, and closing public comment and bringing it back to the commission. Commissioner Schellenberger's question.
What is the timeline that you're looking at? And we've been in concept review for quite some time, and I'm wondering what you're looking at in terms of looking for actual approvals.
Mr. Chair, HLC members, stretching my memory here, I believe the construction we slated for 2014. So the right-of-way phase typically lasts 9 to 12 months, and we're trying to get now from our preliminary design phase to a final design phase, the initiation of a final design phase, and that's why it's critical for us to, it's a pivotal point in the project, to move forward. And so if we do get this western alignment, positive comments on that, then we can move forward. And so with the time frame, we're looking at 2014, so here we are 2012, so a 2-year period before construction starts is what we're looking for. So along the way, there's there's critical path steps along the way for approvals, but we do have to return to the HLC for subsequent approvals. So here we're looking at the concept and specifically the alignment. We'd like to get the alignment, positive comments as we're seeking, and then comments on the aesthetics, what more or less what David was referring to in his part of the presentation. So we'd like to get direction on those, since we haven't had an opportunity to have that interaction discussion up until really today on some of those issues. And so we'd be more than happy to return with the details, but we would like to be able to move forward with the project. And so that time frame, we'll be coming back to the HLC at the appropriate times for your review. My understanding is that there's 3 steps, and this is the step 1 in the HLC review process. So you'll have more opportunity to work with you and to get more comments and direction so we can continue with the project.
Does that help? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And then I'll bring it to the commission for comments. Commissioner Boucher, any comments?
Yes, I just, the main comment.
Is your microphone on?
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I never would have dreamed of putting my microphone without you. I'm just concerned that the new trees replacing the big sycamore are going to be able to provide shade for the creek as soon as possible. I don't know how long it takes.
That's not a question. We're commenting now.
Thank you.
Did I blow it?
No, this is comment. Yeah.
I
Anything
just
else?
said I'm concerned about that.
Okay. Anything else, comment-wise?
Gone.
Okay. Commissioner Drury.
We haven't, this is a concept review, so we really haven't seen the project in drawings. We haven't seen what it's actually going to look like, which I'm assuming we would before we gave a design approval. I do have concern about the false sandstone. I'm not sure that that's a look that really says Santa Barbara. It says sort of, I hate to say this, but the Venetian in Las Vegas. I'm sorry I said that because I actually was there once, and so I'm not really a fan of that false, never again, false sandstone. And I'm concerned about the fact that it's still going to be a concrete walled channel, and that these attempts, as wholehearted as they are, to create habitat along the creek banks will not stand, in my opinion, any significant rain. And then I'll come back to the tree. I'm really, I would, if the research shows that we could make that the bridge narrower and somehow save that grouping of sycamore trunks, I think it's a really, we talk about it in the abstract, but I visited it again today, and it's a really lovely grouping of trees, even if it's one root ball. And I think I think an effort should be made to save that collection of trees. It's a lovely place. That's my comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Sharp?
Well, I share Mr. Drury's, all of his comments. I thought that's very true. And the other issue is, as comes no surprise, the width of the bridge. I think 36 feet is ludicrous. I think that through bulb outs on one or both sides of Mason Street, that could be reduced, because that would reduce the path of travel and the curb to curb and feel that this should be strongly challenged. Engineers have a way of looking at regulations as fact, and generally architects question most things we come upon like that and wonder why. And there has to be a way around the 36-foot width. I think, as I said, the existing new bridges down there are not Santa Barbara. That bothers me a great deal, and it's certainly worth something fighting for.
Commissioner Murray?
I agree with Commissioner Sharp's comments about the continued great effort to reduce the width of the bridge. I mean, if Kimberly is 26 at that bottleneck road, then why couldn't it be 26 on the bridge? I mean, that's another way of measuring that. That's also another road that goes in there. And also keeping it in that neighborhood scale. Now that we know that Entrada project, this is all going to change and it's going to be big and it's on State Street and it goes along with Cabrillo, all the more effort to make that even more neighborly, residential neighborhood transition kind of bridge. I also agree with the Creeks Council's comments on extending that. As much as I really concerned about the sycamore tree, I am convinced. I think there has been enough effort to make me convinced that no matter what, that tree will not survive. And I think the mitigation measures of the additional trees and all over the project, I can live with that. And Roma Santo, I was convinced by what he was saying. And so that's my change of position. But I am not going to relent on the width of the bridge. I really think there is a way to make it smaller. I mean, narrower. The other thing that I agree with is the use of that faux sandstone. I agree with what Mr. Drury was saying, and I also am looking at all these stones on the current bridge, and I also was wondering if there any way those can be reused or something. I don't know, but it's just one way of keeping that feeling of the current bridge, which also really keeps in compatibility with the neighborhood. This sort of real stone and in this kind of style. What else? Yeah, I think all the other comments have been said, so I'll stop there for now.
Commissioner Arias, comments, please?
Thank you. I'm noted to being a tree hugger, but I also am somewhat aware of the fact that increasing the capacity of this creek to a 20-year flood capacity benefits a lot of people in the area. And that's something that I have to weigh against preserving a tree. And I have to, in this case, come down on the side of the residents in the surrounding areas and protecting them. I go with the width of the rail to being 1.5 feet. I like the sloping of the banks with the open base fencing, the base of the fencing being open. And I also recognize that when we have a storm, that's going to go. And it's going to have to be replaced or what. I would like to know the number of trees and the location. I'd like to know specifically what we're going to get for the removal of that tree. And I think in reality, if we got a 50-year or 70 or 100-year storm, that tree might not make it, given the problems. And so I reluctantly have to say that the benefit of the community is such for that to be removed. The storm drain, I think that needs to be looked at very carefully to see what the options are.
I'm sorry, you're talking about the abandoned storm pipe?
Yeah,
Okay.
the storm pipe, and what was said about the possibility of removing the pipe, the pipe up there. I agree that staff should look at the narrowest possible bridge and look at your rules and all. It's nice if you have a crystal ball to look in the future and know what's going to happen, but I would really like to keep the character of that neighborhood intact and not have it become a whoosh through of cars. So I don't know about the underneath of the bridge. That question was raised by I believe Mr. Schellenberger raised that question, and I'm not sure what he meant by it, but I think that is something that maybe he could address. I also think it's very important that the trees be placed where they can shade the creek, up and down the creek if possible. I like the reduction of the sidewalks and the possible narrowing of Kimberly Street. And I also think there should be no parking on the bridge, and possibly look at parking on the other streets to see if it can be reduced. And again, that affects the residential quality of the houses. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Reyes. Commissioner Winnick, any additional different comments? Thank you. Commissioner Schellenberger, any additional different comments?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Reyes, can you repeat what you were looking for? input?
You talked about the underneath the bridge.
Oh,
yeah.
That is on my list.
Yeah.
Thank you. So first, I just want to express appreciation for the obvious research and exploration of options that's gone into this, especially since our last meeting. You've obviously done a lot in the last month, I guess it was. So thank you for that. And the concept is totally supportable. Like you said, we'll work out the details and that type of thing. And I'm going to align myself with wanting the narrowest bridge possible. I think that your phrase there was a good one, and I think we should explore what is that minimum number, and let's go with that. And as we talked here, I was flooded with ideas, and I'm not sure.
No
that
pun intended.
That's cute.
You got 20 years left?
And I'm a little reluctant to go into them, frankly, because they're sort of big picture. I'm even thinking Mason from State Street to Chapala as thinking about that street as a whole. But I know that we're focused on bridge alignment and a specific task to review here, so I won't really go into some of those larger, broader concepts. I think along the lines you mentioned, we'll get into the details later. I'd like to see just a little better, or not better, but just as we proceed, to see things more as using the phrase, what's it going to look like? So take, for example, this section elevation 4. Really what you'll see is the bridge beyond. You're seeing the upland vegetation, and that's I understand why this is done the way it is, but at some point we need to see what would that actually look like with the arrow pointing toward the bridge there. Mm-hmm. Also, with this kind of going to combine a discussion about the sycamore trees. Again, I think it's a great mitigation proposal. I think it achieves what we're looking for. But I actually think you could have done yourself some favors with showing shading. The solar orientation, is going from east to west, and it would actually go around these trees. And I think the broadcast of the shadow, you might want to show that on your plan, how that would broadcast. It's even evidenced in your 20 West Mason photo there. I mean, that house and those palm trees are casting shadows that are doing a good job of shading water there. So it looks to me like in the final analysis, we'll end up with a larger shade canopy than what is there now. And you might help yourself with graphically showing that. And then sort of in response to the wildlife concerns, we heard a little bit about it today, but in previous meetings for sure. The reason I asked about the span point is I'm not sure if moving from it's going to be the easterly span abutment towards State Street, if that doesn't want to cantilever at some distance to allow some slope underneath the bridge, that would allow wildlife to travel underneath that bridge, and they're not blocked by this vertical wall. I think the concern there, if I know this a little bit, is the wildlife having to escape predators. And this is outside of my purview. I'm just bringing it up because it occurred to me during this discussion. But anyway, I know that's a more expensive bridge to cantilever, and I get all that, but it may be an option to pursue anyway. And maybe in the future we can see sort of an aerial view or an aerial photo that shows, we can actually see the alignment of cars parked and just you can show us why this 36 feet is necessary, or whatever that distance is, if it's 20, 36, whatever. As far as the creek, there were some details proposed today, sort of conceptually, and talking about the creek railing. I don't think I like the proposed sort of pipe rail design. I think the more elegant wrought iron design that's shown in the photo is preferable.
The pipe rails, just for your information. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
No, actually, if you would chime in, because we didn't really talk about it.
Well, I was going to just point out that it's already been approved by this body as part of the Chapala Street Bridge project.
For the Chapala, okay.
Yeah.
And then I know the other two were basically approved under previous. The Ortega Street one is constructed, and the alternate two, I would just say either is okay with me personally. Alternate two might even be more appropriate with all of the Spanish architecture that's in the surrounding neighborhood. I think there's only basically the one craftsman or whatever the wood house there, but and looking toward the future at La Entrada and potential Harbor View expansions in the future. Probably alternate two I would be more supportive of. That's it.
Hold on, please. Okay, I'm going to...
Mr. Chair,
yes, Commissioner Reyes.
one additional comment. I think it would have been helpful for the members of this commission to come up with a more definitive decision about the tree if we had seen the arborist report.
We did actually see an arborist report.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
I believe we saw one from Mr. Spiewak.
Okay, I must have missed it. I'm
Or,
sorry.
yeah, it was Mr. Spiewak. He was
Okay,
here.
so there was
Yeah.
one. Okay, good. Thank you.
And I did look at it and reviewed it. Okay, so I'm going to summarize the comments, and hopefully I'll find somebody that would make a motion with respect to those comments. So, Gloria, are you ready? The construction at the foot of the habitat expansion zones should encourage tidewater goby habitat. Applicant shall develop elevations of the underside of the bridge, showing the underside of the bridge. Provide significant size trees to provide shade to the creek as soon as possible. The faux sandstone detailing needs work. Perhaps reuse the existing sandstone. The majority of the commissioners felt that the mitigation proposed for the Sycamore removal was acceptable. The width of the bridge should be reduced. 36 feet is too wide. The bridge width should be a width, the bridge should be a width that is consistent with the residential neighborhood. The applicant shall provide a plan showing location and quantity of trees that are mitigating the removal of the sycamore. There is support for the 1.5-foot width bridge rail as opposed to the 2-foot. The abandoned drain pipe should be removed as part of this project. Present the commission with drawings that show, quote, what it will look like, end quote. Show shade that will be cast onto the creek by the trees. Study adding a way for wildlife to traverse north-south underneath the bridge. Provide aerial photos supporting the bridge width. Bridge rail number 2 may be the most appropriate. Creek railing B may not be appropriate. And finally, the Commission appreciates the research and exploration of the project as it was presented today. Do I have a maker of a motion?
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner.
You did also, there were some comments that you made about reducing the widths of sidewalks. That should probably...
I didn't hear anybody else
Yes,
latch
but
onto
you
those.
made them.
That's all right.
So
I'm only
they're
one
appropriate.
commissioner.
Yeah, but they're appropriate to be put in, and you tell people new comments, so that precludes that.
Then the applicant shall study reducing
Thank
the
you.
width of the sidewalks along the north side of Mason Street as well as the east side of Kimberly Avenue.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Jury.
Under discussion of the motion, I think it should be strongly advised to study the width of the bridge vis-a-vis federal guidelines.
Okay.
So what I read, maybe you addressed that, but I think that's one of the kind of the crux points of this discussion.
Okay. So Gloria, if you could add to the comment about the width of the bridge should be reduced to should be reduced. The applicant shall investigate exceptions to the federal standard. Okay. Does anybody want to make and support that?
Mr. Chair, there was one other element that I'm hoping that you can include, which would be the western bridge abutment alignment. It's critical to the moving forward on the project. This alignment is the starting point for the bridge geometry, and with that comes the 55-foot, the curb return, and the start of the Kimberly, and we will. And we've responded to the width issue. But
Does the commission support the proposed alignment of the westerly bridge abutment?
I thought we were going to have a comment.
You've got support. Okay. So there is. Actually, that was a straw vote, so we better take a count. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are in support. 1 is not in support. Wasn't really meant to be a straw vote, but it ended up that way, so that's fine. Okay. Does anybody have anything else, or can somebody please support that motion, make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
And is it 2-week or indefinite?
Indefinite with this.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. We have an approval by Schallenberger, a second by Boucher for indefinite continuance with the comments made. Mr. Lamont.
Mr. Chair, I just want to summarize some points based on your motion. You'll be getting some training on purview, and your purview does stop at some point. And we will be asking Public Works to provide you the documentation with respect to the standards that they are being cited. I think that's appropriate to see if an exception can be granted. But at one point, engineers will say that nothing, they will often cite either standard and say there is no flexibility here. And so I think at this point, that's what they're asking you to provide. Same thing with reduction of sidewalk widths. If the city engineer is not recommending that, they're going to come back and say that. And ultimately, if you disagree, it's the council's decision to act on that.
Okay. So does the motion need to be amended? Or
No, I think you,
Okay.
you saved it by saying provide us some type of evidence for if an exception can be granted.
Chair Sitting, one other point.
Yes,
when you
Mr.
made
Berman.
when you discussed the two bridge railings, it wasn't clear to me which one you were referring to. I think you used a different numbering system to what was used in the
On the
two.
plan, I believe I said there may be support for alternate 2 or for bridge railing number 2. And then there may not be support for creek railing B. No, must we? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? One opposed, that's Drury. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll take this one. You can take that one, though, David.
Definitely interesting.
Thank you.
I'm going to recess the commission for 10 minutes. Recess for 10 minutes. Commissioners? Commissioners, please take a seat.
We're not going far. I know what you mean. We have a commitment here.
Okay. So we are on the discussion item, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to discuss the HLC purview authority and the refresher on HLC's purview, scope of review and comments on various types of projects, how the HLC interacts with other boards and commissioners. And we have Mr. Jaime Limon and Ms. Heather Baker.
Ms. Baker will be presenting this part 2.
We are going to hold off on the excellence in customer service, code of conduct, and meeting procedures for another meeting, not necessarily the next meeting, but another meeting that has a fairly light agenda.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Sitting and members of the Historic Landmarks Commission. I just have a PowerPoint here that we can go through. So again, the topic for today and today's training is the HLC purview, and we'll refresh what the scope of your review is, comments on various types of projects, and how you interact with different boards and commissions. So just going back to the Santa Barbara Municipal Code, I've just highlighted a few parts that are listed for the HLC's purpose. And as you can see, it's very centered on landmarks, historic resources, and getting those designated and protected. And then, of course, as part of the protection of those resources, your commission reviews projects to make sure that there's a compatibility of architectural styles within landmark districts. And of all of our design review hearing bodies at the city, the HLC gets the most detailed in that role. So also for your information, I passed out a copy of the charter for the HLC, and it has very similar information to the Santa Barbara Municipal Code as far as what the powers and duties are of the HLC. So major areas of purview within that include, of course, El Pueblo Viejo, alterations there, and then wherever historic resources that are potentially significant occur citywide, the HLC takes a look at those. You're consistently reviewing cultural resources reports, and then you offer advisory comments to various other hearing bodies, and we'll get into this in a little bit more detail. Also, as you're reviewing projects, you're looking at design guidelines and making sure that they're consistent with those. And, of course, size, bulk, and sale comes into that with compatibility with the neighborhoods. Sometimes the HLC is looking for compliance with various conditions of approval that may have been either set by your commission or another review board or through an environmental review process. There's a number of city projects, of course, that come through to the HLC. This afternoon you had an example of one of those. The types of government projects can include these items. in particular, what we wanted to emphasize today a little bit is that for example, let's say you have a traffic control signal coming to the HLC, you're not reviewing whether or not there should be a traffic control signal or how large it should be, but rather perhaps the color of the standard of it, or if there's some decorative detailing of the traffic control signal, like what the style of that would be. So again, the question was, is there purview over the placement of these items that the government projects might be proposing? And I would say that we'd encourage you to look at those within your role, which is compatibility with the neighborhood, protection of historic resources, and so forth. But really, again, there is overlapping purview among various boards and commissions and staff recommendations and codes and regulations. So whatever comments you might have about that should be in deference to the other types of considerations that are going on. And again, whenever you're kind of going in those overlapping areas, to really emphasize the reasons why you might have questions about the location within your concerns about aesthetics. As far as safer intersections, again, rather than the questioning that, say, for example, the need for an intersection or the sizing, et cetera, just more focusing on the aesthetics of it, such as the paving and the landscaping and so forth. So, yeah, and again, I did listen into the end of your last project, and we would normally discourage discussion of the widths of public infrastructure. Right, which in this case this afternoon you did talk about how the rest of the neighborhood has historically a different pattern. So, but it's an area to tread on lightly and not as often, hopefully, as the other topics. Okay, so also Highway 101 has a special treatment with the HLC because of the Coastal Act, the El Pueblo Viejo district, and then we have a special set of guidelines. So there's a small portion of the 101 that actually is subject to review. We also, sometimes your commission has school district, county, or federal buildings brought for your review, and it's important to remember that these are actually courtesy reviews versus actually having the power to approve or deny these particular projects. So it's really a cooperative effort in requesting design changes when these.
Mr. Chair, there's often, concurrent discretionary in the county or some other body that reviews it for consistency all with their guidelines. So what they're doing is, because it's located within city limits, making sure it's consistent with whatever guidelines we have adopted. That's correct. You're often dealing with a project that might go to county BAR or something like that.
Okay. So what kind of things would be clearly outside of the HLC purview? Zoning ordinance compliance. We know that there's all kinds of different planning review going on concurrent with your review. So, for example, our staff is checking for zoning compliance and so forth, but it's not the HLC's job to check for compliance with each thing. Comments to staff, the staff hearing officer, the planning commission regarding modifications beyond any potential aesthetic concerns that you might have regarding the modification. The whole philosophy of how modifications are granted are under the purview of the show and the PC versus the HLC. And really, they're just looking to you to comment as to, does it create any compatibility concerns, aesthetic concerns? And that's the type of comments they're looking for from you versus whether or not overall it's an appropriate land development decision to grant a modification. No. No. Right. Right. Does it present any guidelines inconsistencies, or does it create any aesthetic issues? Just correct.
So we're not going to take public comment. That's what I thought too.
Yes, we are.
It's a requirement.
I think the confusion is that support often leads to the impression from applicants that you're approving their modification. And so any implication that somehow your support should be the basis for granting the modification is what we're trying to avoid. So you could generally send positive comments saying that it doesn't pose any inconsistency with the neighborhood patterns of development. That's the type of things that we want to see. Now, conversely, you could also say you don't think this is a good modification to grant, and explain to the staff why staff shouldn't support the modification to be granted aesthetically. Well, to the degree that it poses a problem with how it fit into the neighborhood.
Mr. Murray has a question?
Yeah, I had a question, that last slide.
I was trying to find your motion worksheet. Do any of you have that out?
That's in my binder.
That's laminated,
Yeah, we have
so you
some
could use it
examples.
each time. Because on there, again, it has a quote of how you can handle your comments on modifications. So I would really encourage you to refer back to that anytime you have a project with modifications, because it really outlines how you can comment on those.
Okay.
So did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question on the density. Now, the density could be addressed through the compatibility analysis.
That's correct.
Right? Okay.
You can actually state that the building is too large, and how they solve it is up to them. They can remove a story, remove units. It's just however they need to manipulate the. That's correct. Rather than say, 14 units is too many for this project.
Okay. Mr. Chair Suding's found the motion worksheet that I was referring to.
It says under Section 8 modifications, the modification is not aesthetically appropriate. Proposed modification does not pose consistency issues with the following design guidelines or required findings. I didn't realize it would be televised. Okay. Those findings require a list of what those findings are. And then number 9, the yard, lot, or floor area modification does not promote an appearance of uniformity of development. So that's how we deal with modifications. Okay.
And Mr. Chair, also, I would like to encourage you to just choose when you'd like to take public comment for this item. This is a public hearing still. So,
okay.
Yeah, you could choose to do it at the end of the presentation,
okay.
But at some point. Okay.
And I should probably let you get through the presentation rather than keep interrupting you with questions.
It's completely your choice.
I would rather interrupt you with questions as they come up, if that's. It is, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead. Sorry.
Sure. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Traffic or parking project. Here again, rather than is this a valid project, the size of it or the impacts of it or how it's functionally working, should it be this type of turn or that type of turn, or do we like roundabouts or not? Please, as much as you can, try to set all of those types of considerations aside. There is a transportation and circulation committee that considers these things. Your role really is to take a look at, yes, okay, they have chosen this functional design. Now, how does this affect the aesthetics of this neighborhood and this intersection? And so what's the landscaping, what type of paving, what type of coloring of paint on the equipment do we want to specify? And really that's the purview of the Historic Landmarks Commission. Yes? Mm-hmm. We are being televised, yeah.
So it seems to me that when we are dealing with curb extensions, bulb outs, traffic calming devices, they do have a physical appearance that we can address on that basis alone, right? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's very important that if you do want to comment on one of these items, that, again, it just goes back to what's the aesthetic concern or the historic preservation concern.
Now,
right.
Commissioner Schallenberger?
I don't think we're limited. I think you just have to go to the other side of the table under public comment if you have certain concerns that are, I mean, you don't do it on the role of a commissioner, right? You're still a concerned member of the public, and you can just go to the other side of the table.
Mr. Schallenberger, we would think that if a project's before you, that you would probably refrain to doing that. Typically, you can act as a private citizen and comment on a project, but often these projects are coming to you for a decision. So at some point, you need to sort of, decide whether you're going to be a commissioner or a member of the public. We'd rather have you be a commissioner. So that's what we mean about, your role is you're trying to, in the confines of what's before you. And that's what we would recommend you do.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Rios.
Maybe a month ago, we had a project where we were told that each member of the commission had to read statements.
The project compatibility analysis.
I'll comment. No, it's actually sort of overstating the issue. I think if you have some record that you have considered the criteria and that it's incorporated into your comments to the Planning Commission or as part of your final decision, that would be okay. We actually are going to have some training for staff also, because staff sometimes has a difficulty of how to get these, what's necessary in order to get those comments to the Planning Commission. So we'll be expanding a little bit more on guideline consistency. That's actually one of the topics that we're going to come back to you and talk to you about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Drury.
Yes.
Right.
And along your consideration, you could actually raise those issues and make statements saying, oh, I think it's compatible with the neighborhood, or I don't think it poses any impact to the resources. And what we want in the final motion is to have some statement to that effect.
Okay. And also regarding Commissioner Schallenberger, your question, one idea that I had listening to your last item, for example, with the Tidewater Goby concern and so forth, I might suggest that the HLC consider phrasing those types of things that aren't directly within your purview as maybe something to ask that the Creeks Advisory Group take a look at. So the HLC notes this public comment and would like to request that the Creeks Advisory Group follow up on that. That way, the applicant isn't bringing back in their next iteration of drawings and explaining how they're addressing that particular comment to you, but rather to the Creeks Group. So just
very good point and point taken.
Okay. Environmental review determinations are generally outside the HLC purview. That's done at a staff level or, for example, the Planning Commission and so forth. However, in some cases, staff will provide environmental documents for your review, or there may be imposition of conditions related to that environmental review that either the HLC is posing or is checking for compliance with.
Question.
Yes, Commissioner Rios.
So if there's an EIR on a project and we have something to do with that project, do we see, we aren't required to read the EIR, we are, or what?
That often, the several public input periods and periods of availability, and we would come to this commission and indicate to you that we have this document for review, and you could comment on those conditions. There's a public period comment period. But what we're talking about is more normally an ND, which is now, if it doesn't go to the Planning Commission, that document is actually accepted here.
A negative declaration.
Now, if there, I have to figure out how to say this. If a commissioner has, because of the impacts of this project, made comments on the adequacy of the EIR, does that mean that that commissioner should step down if a court? I'm on.
You're not hooked up though with the.
Oh, does that mean that? Oh, it's. What can I say?
I think you can still.
You can still act on the project even though you've made comments on the adequacy.
I don't think that discludes you from participation. But I could certainly check into that.
I just don't know. I mean, this is coming up in maybe 8 months or so, and I'm curious to know.
I'll look into that and get back to you.
Okay.
All right. So, and then, what's that?
This is your. So.
Okay, where are we? There's so many different topics. topics in here. Okay. So the HLC is a charter commission. Okay, so, and there's a couple of other charter commissions that you interact with. And so Section 800 of the Charter of the City of Santa Barbara says that the actions of charter-established boards and commissions are advisory to the City Council. So that's a good thing just to keep in mind in general, that whatever work or comments you're doing, think of yourselves as basically advising council in the end. And there's a lot of interaction with other groups, and we'll go into how that that happens. So this isn't an exact correct chart or anything like that. But the point here is that there's a lot of interaction between various boards and commissions, and that you're all funneling up to comment to the City Council. Now, the exact placement of the PC on here, and your roles between each person, but the point is sometimes that you're commenting directly up to council, sometimes you're commenting to the PC, sometimes you're commenting back and forth to these other groups that then are reporting to another group. There's a lot of teamwork here, and when our applicants come to the city, they're not viewing HLC is some completely different entity than, for example, the Parks and Recreation Commission. They're just viewing us all as the city. And so it's really important to keep in mind that it's really a team effort, this whole land development review process. And we're all in the end trying to come up with some sort of solution that council would be okay with. Yeah, I'll get into what some of those acronyms were. So among the charter boards and commissions, those that were established by charter, that includes this list. And from staff's perspective, there's really just a few of them that the HLC interacts with quite a lot. And so that would include, for example, the Planning Commission and the Parks and Recreation Commission. And I did include their charter purpose on the back side of the copy of your charter purpose, so you could kind of see where there's some overlap. So, for example, if there's a park that's within EPV, then it's both under Parks and Recreation purview as well as HLC purview as one example. Now there's other advisory groups as well, and this list is groups that were not established by charter. However, a lot of them still report directly to council on advising them on various issues. So it's not to say that they're any less important just because they're not in the charter. They still are a council advisory group. The HLC works with the Visual Arts and Public Places Subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of the Arts Advisory Committee, and then, of course, the Transportation and Circulation Committee quite a bit. Right, and the Sign Committee was also. Yeah. Okay, so with the Transportation and Circulation Committee, this is what their general functions are, and this is taken off the website for their group. But you can see it's focused on pedestrian, bicycle, transit needs, traffic management, traffic calming devices, and basic mobility goals. So when a project comes to you that involves, for example, a traffic calming device, it's likely gone to this group previously for their careful review. Now, sometimes if you've got quite a different opinion on something about how it fits in with that neighborhood, it may end up returning back to the TCC after your comment and then come back again. But ideally, they're kind of should be really the main purview on the functioning of these items should be with the TCC versus the HLC. The Planning Commission, this is their excerpt, and as you can see, it focuses on land subdivisions, tentative subdivision maps. They also have purview over zoning ordinance items such as modifications, variances, site plans, development plans. It's really kind of a bit more of the heavier land use decisions. And so you know that sometimes projects will come to you first before. This is the org chart, which wouldn't even fit on a PowerPoint slide, but basically there's this whole design review process that's happening, and as you know, before it's allowed to go on to the PC or show level, usually it needs to be ready for preliminary approval with positive comments, and then it'll come back to you for that. So that's how you relate with the Planning Commission and the staff hearing officer.
Don't you mean project design approval?
Oh, excuse me. Yes, we do, and this needs to be updated. Project design approval. Thank you. Okay, so the Visual Arts and Public Places group. Again, they're a subcommittee of the Arts Advisory Committee, and there's a number of different members on that. So they make recommendations to council through the Arts Advisory Committee, and I thought this was interesting because it specifically listed out that if it's within park facility, then it goes to the Parks and Recreation Commission prior to going to council, whatever recommendations they have. And of course, it's the same thing if it's within EPV, it's going to come to you before going to council. But it's, again, all working together. And
Okay, can I back up? Is, say, De La Guerra Plaza, that's a public park, so that's in the jurisdiction of Parks and Recreation.
Yes.
If so, would we see then an art piece that were to be installed in De La Guerra Plaza?
Right, because it's part of your purview as well. So you're kind of getting the idea that something can go through a number of different committees.
Okay, so I thought that said that it would be the purview of Parks and Rec and not HLC, but it didn't say that. Okay, never mind.
Well, both. It would be both.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Okay, got it. All right.
All right, so then the Parks and Recreation Commission, they have purview over parks, recreation, beaches, creeks, plazas, parkways, and street trees. And so again, it's a lot of overlapping because if any of these are in HLC, then you also have a comment ability. But again, the purpose of both the Parks and Rec Commission and your involvement is to create a project that the council would be favorable towards.
I do want to note that one of the most recent ordinance amendments regarding our tree preservation ordinance is they actually agreed to defer front yard setbacks in EPV to you as the primary. They felt there was just too much dual roles. So now we do have just your emphasis is to review those type of applications.
But not street trees.
Right.
Which brings us to the Street Tree Advisory Committee, which is
Our purview.
Within EPV, yeah.
So the Street Tree Advisory Committee reports to the Parks and Recreation Commission. However, sometimes they are interacting with the HLC depending on the type of project that's before you. So Tim Downey, the city arborist, had asked me to go ahead and convey these few reminders to the HLC. And he was just saying, hey, remember that the number, kind, and placement of street trees is determined by the Parks and Recreation Department. So if there's someone who's redeveloping an entire block and they're wanting to propose certain trees in the parkway, that those, of course, always need to be per the Parks and Recreation Department plan, street tree plan. And then if someone wants to plant something that would grow taller than 8 inches in the parkway, that is not to be done without the Parks and Recreation Department approval.
And what role does Public Works play in that? In the past,
I have to defer a lot of these questions to him.
In the past, I've gotten a comment from Public Works.
Yeah, they get involved because they typically are the permitting agency that deals with these public improvements.
Right-of-ways, right.
And they would be referring the planting portion to parks to see if they would allow it.
So that comment then has come through Parks and Rec Commission to
Public Works, and they enforce it basically for them.
Okay.
It also deals with whatever you want to put in the parkway. People want to put stepping stones, whatever, improve them.
Right.
So
That's
forth.
the next, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Question.
Yes, Commissioner Rios?
Okay, it talks about the number, kind, and placement of street trees, but it doesn't mention size. And we have, on more than one occasion, required significant sizes of trees to be placed. I'm thinking of one in the shopping center where we had the argument about
Carrillo and
yeah, and they
Delvina.
were taking out, and we placed a tree.
I think Mr. Downey just inadvertently left out the number, kind, and size. Pardon me.
It's Radio Square.
It was Radio
so-
Square.
right.
Was that beyond our purview?
No, I don't think size is beyond our purview. But
We
maybe staff
we
needs to check
put
on that.
location. We specified where.
Well, you could request a size, but ultimately, again, they're going to decide what size they believe is appropriate.
Now, if they determine the number of trees, and we feel a need to go over and above that number, how does that play into it?
Ultimately, they have to decide that they agree with you. I don't think there would be a position where
It's an increase, not necessarily a decrease,
Right.
but an increase. So,
Right.
okay. And that's fine. I mean, I am the liaison to the Street Tree Advisory Committee, so I do watch their agenda for things that are within EPV. So try to keep you guys up to date on that.
And I would recommend that if you have some special comment regarding street trees, that again, be careful with the phrasing in the motion, that it would be, we would recommend that the Street Tree Advisory Committee consider
Gotcha.
this, rather than requiring something outside your purview. Okay, so non-living ground cover, again, that's within the Parks and Rec Department purview. And then Tim just wanted to reiterate that, of course, the Parks and Rec Department, Street Tree Advisory Committee, and Parks and Rec Commission, they welcome any comments from the HLC, and, it's all working together again. Okay, so council liaisons, they're in the process of assigning a new one for the HLC. It may be new council member Murillo, but we haven't heard officially yet since Michael Self is not on the council anymore, and she was your previous liaison. They may attend the meetings, they might comment, and then they provide reports back to the council as well sometimes. So.
Mr. Schellenberger?
When we have a project like we had last meeting, Chapala Street, I think we need to insist that liaison is here. When council has overridden by appeal Landmark's decision,
it'd be helpful to have
council
the
needs to
support
be here
of
for
council.
those types of agenda items, I think.
Okay.
Just because those comments that were coming from the public were really more, I think, appropriately addressed by council, since it was their decision, really.
Yeah.
Just a note.
So it's interesting because council has a liaison to HLC, but is there an HLC member that's a liaison to council? So how would that encouraging happen? Staff would ask. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
We do, well, I guess we just sort of elect somebody if we need to represent.
If there's a project or something specific on the agenda that we
Yeah,
feel
you do
this
that
is-
case by
yeah,
case,
we
right?
do.
That's
Mhm,
right.
mhm.
So, okay. So, and then what is staff's role when there's overlapping jurisdictions and purviews? And so, as Jaime, I think, did this afternoon a little bit, we will advise you from time to time if there's a motion that we see that needs to be recrafted in order for the HLC to keep within your purview. And we can also advise you of what procedures to follow if there's clearly conflicting recommendations. So there's a couple of ways that these can be handled in motions. So here's a couple example motions. A bad example might be, say, okay, the project shall do this and this in order to be supportable. And again, this is in a situation where you know that another board or commission has a different recommendation. And the reason why this wouldn't be a good example is because it doesn't acknowledge that there's other boards and commissions that are commenting on it as well. So a way to do this in a good way, a good example would be the HLC advises and it could be, for example, the Transportation and Circulation Committee or the Parks and Recreation Commission, fill in the blank as to whoever it is, that you advise the entity and City Council that the HLC recommends, whatever your recommendation is, for the following reasons. And then it's really important, of course, when there is the overlapping purview and there is a difference in opinion, to really clearly state the reasons and relate those back to what your purview is. So that way, it just makes things a lot easier for working together going forward.
Isn't that kind of understood, though, that we're advising the other body and city council that these are our recommendations? I mean, do we need to state that in each motion?
I think, Mr. Chair, it really depends how strong your comments are. Sometimes you do come into the motion wanting to convey how strongly you feel about your issue or your concern, and it comes out with you shall do this or you shall do this. And what we're trying to convey is there may be a different conclusion from another advisory group. Okay. And so we just don't want you to dig in your claws or you draw the line.
You're saying to have claws.
Well, where it appears that you are...
I understand.
Adamant.
Yeah, adamant. You're suggesting something that they do, and you're advising them why you're making that recommendation.
So it's more of a case-by-case basis on that. I mean,
right.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, you can structure it any way you want as long as it conveys what your recommendation is.
Okay.
Question?
Yes, Commissioner Reyes.
Two other subjects. With the redevelopment agency being taken over by the city, we have seen the several projects that are under, we have been told, were redevelopment money. Will we be receiving a status report on those projects, or are they just going to disappear, or what? And the second question I have is, when we have applicants that take indefinite continuances and it goes on for a long period of time, it's very difficult. The commission changes, and going back and hearing things and trying to figure out and things like that so you can act on a project. It's very difficult for people because we're all professionals and most of us have jobs. So has staff ever considered limiting the time that these sort of extensions can go on? So those are my two questions.
Okay, the first question, Commissioner Arias, is that there has been some tentative decisions to sort of certain redevelopment projects are no longer being pursued because of the funding concerns. So we are in the process of identifying those projects and understanding whether there is a commitment to continue on those projects or not. And we can provide a better status once we know. I think we're still trying to figure that out. And we will do that with the Commission. And then your second question, it has to do with extensions. We did, in fact, go back to City Council and establish a maximum amount of periods. And now you're entitled to one extension, design review. It's a staff's role now to grant these extensions. So the bottom line is that you have up to the point where your discretionary decision expires. Unfortunately, or fortunately for the developers, the state of California has extended extensions to tentative maps and allowed certain projects to continue to be active because of the economy, state of the economy. So we've had projects that have lasted and are active that extend beyond the normal 5-year range. So we're looking at sort of a 5-year period as an adequate time to get through the review process and a permitting process. And there'll be some exceptions to that because of these, again, extensions that the state of California has granted.
Then would it be an unworkable burden on staff when you have a project that has gone on for, say, 4.5 years, and you have 3 or 4 new commissioners on the board, that you burn a disc or make sure that we can see so we can act on it? I'm just trying to think of the most efficient way for all of us to get together on doing things.
Well, Commissioner, if it's been that long, hopefully they're at final approval stage, that they're returning either at final approval where we don't feel you need to be compelled to act on that final approval.
It's
so
mainly just about details and
yeah,
things like
at that point, I would abstain and say you haven't participated in any discussions at that point.
That's probably true.
So that would make it easier for you. But if for some reason you believe that you need a history on a project, we will provide whatever information you need. Just let us know, and we will provide that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Drury.
True that we can just go on the website and scroll down and find not only the meeting we need, but go right to the project if we needed to.
Right. There are activities in our caseload that could be tracked, but we don't need to have you have to do so much research. If you want that information, we can put it in summary reports that'll provide it for you.
I think it's important, if you feel that way, to discuss it then with staff, and staff will help you make a determination on how much sort of research or background. Don't automatically go and do all that because it may not be important or pertinent.
Right.
I had another question. This is completely outside of the discussion item. I'm hoping it's appropriate. Wanted to sort of poll the commission as to whether or not they wanted to start the meetings earlier at 1 o'clock instead of 1:30, just so that we get out of here a little bit earlier. Is that appropriate to ask that question here? What? Why not ask it? Because it's not agendized. Yeah, so I don't know. Who
sets that time?
It's set by us.
It is?
Yeah. There's nothing magical about that time.
You often set your meeting procedures, and time changes have occurred over the years. ABR changed their times from 3:30 to 3, and I think this commission has changed their time, if I recall.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if anybody feels that that's...
That extra half an hour after lunch is a waste to me, so I'm fine with that.
I'm happy to move it to 1.
You guys want to try it at 1?
Yes.
Okay. So, next meeting, whenever?
It might be good to just consider how that affects the consent calendar scheduling and the lunch breaks for staff, but we could probably look into that. So.
Would it work for staff, though? That's the
Sure,
whole
I think
thing.
it would. I think
Okay.
I don't know how many times we go into the lunch hour. Maybe when we have more than 5 items, maybe that would happen. Yeah, it's consent reviewers and staff that would have to come back quicker.
Which is good. I think we should try it maybe for 6 months or something. What I don't want to see, though, is one meeting starts at 1 o'clock and then the next meeting starts at 1:30
Yeah,
and
be
next meeting 1
consistent.
o'clock, next meeting 1. We should keep it consistent, try it for 6 months, see if it works for everybody, and go from there. Okay? There you have it.
Chair Suding, I did have a tiny little bit more on the
Oh, I
presentation.
thought you were done.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Baker.
I just wanted to explain what would happen in the cases where there might be a differing opinion between your group and, say, another group that has purview. So, for example, I heard that with the eucalyptus trees at the library, that's under Parks and Recreation purview as well as HLC purview. So, really, if the two groups are disagreeing, the council would be the one to make the final decision on that. And so that's where having a motion like this is so helpful, because it shows that you're working with it and you've got it well documented what your concerns are regarding the items. So because again, it's this all back and forth and then up to council. So, yeah. And that concludes my presentation. Unless, do you have anything to add? Okay. So.
Thank you, Mr. Lamone. Thank you, Ms.
you.
Baker. The
Thank you.
Meeting
Public comment?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. I guess I can open public comment. We have a member of the public wishing to speak. Mr. DeForest, if you could please come forward. Yes, we are. Chop, chop.
I just want to know, because we've had this a couple of times, when this group, the Historic Landmarks Commission, cannot accept the plans of a applicant and will not support it, what is the procedure there? Yeah, it just automatically, I mean, if they want to pursue their project, they have to take it to city council. Is that
the way I understand it, it would be a denial from this commission, and then
If
city
it's
council.
subject to an approval, there are points in the approval or the review stage where a project has to go to the planning commission, so it's premature to deny it. The applicant has only one choice, to pursue it, even with the objections from this commission, and that would be foolish, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, so projects are not denied. The commission's disapproval of or non-acceptance of a project goes to the, if it hasn't gone to the planning commission or
Goes to council.
no, goes to the planning commission is told that
The HLC does not support the project.
right.
Right.
And then if the planning commission agrees with that, but now, can the planning commission overrule the?
No.
No, then the planning commission will come back with its report, and then
The applicant has the option of working within those parameters.
Right.
Or the recourse would be the city council.
Right. They'd have to come back to the HLC and see if the HLC would accept the project that the planning commission approved. But if it hadn't changed to deal with HLC's concerns, it would be unlikely that this commission would reverse themselves, because they were on record that they didn't support the project. And we would actually go up to planning commission and probably not recommend approval of the project because HLC did not support the project. That would probably be the most likely outcome.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeForest. I will adjourn the meeting.